Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Buy the Horns, a Bitcoin podcast about South Africa. Today, we've got a very interesting one for you. I know this is a hot topic for a lot of South Africans who have been, I don't want to say flee, but South Africans love to leave South Africa. It's tough out there. And normally we go to places like Australia and New Zealand, but those have subsequently turned into shitholes. So, you have to investigate your options. So today's guest we got on the show is none other than Katie the Russian. Katie runs Plan B Passports, and today we're going to talk about fuck you money, fuck you passports, and a fuck you mentality. Katie, welcome to the show.
Love it. That's perfect. Really appreciate this intro.
So glad to have you, Katie. Before we dive straight into what it is that you do, I think it'd be really cool to discuss your background, because you've been a Bitcoiner for quite some time. And I mean, I'm not sure you fall on the political spectrum, but I'm guessing somewhere between anarchist and libertarian. Maybe you want to tell us a bit about your background, and I heard you had some run-ins with Faketoshi along the way as well.
Yep. So I was born and raised in Russia, only moved to the United States 5 years ago. And I moved to the States, did not speak the language, did not understand what to do. And I was lucky enough to find the Bitcoin tribe very early on, my journey through immigration. So that's been quite a fun journey so far. Just being born and raised in Russia definitely gave me a better perspective on why Bitcoin matters. Basically, it gave me so many experience that led me to where I'm at right now. Like in Russia, we had different political structure over the last 120 years. We were monarchy, communism, democracy with the same president for 20 years. Cool story, bro. Like, of course, I'm going to be into government and happy to share my money with them, because they have my interest at heart for sure. And then throughout my lifetime, I had two hyperinflations, which definitely made me realize what is limited supply, what is store of value, etc., etc. So once I actually dove into Bitcoin, I was like, holy shit, this thing is amazing. It's going to be part of my life forever. And I'm going to advocate for that. And I'm going to be extremely passionate. And I'm going to build my business around it too. So that's how I ended up where I'm at right now.
Sure. Awesome. So two hyperinflation. So obviously that must have happened when you were a child or a teenager. You experienced hyperinflation in Russia of the ruble, right?
Well, the last one was quite recently in a way. Maybe some people wouldn't call it hyperinflation, but like when your currency dropped half, like, so let's say that in 2014, the Russian ruble to dollar was 36 rubles to dollar. And then like a couple months later, it was 75 rubles per dollar. And if you're living abroad or traveling abroad or doing any business with any foreign country, you realize that you're fucked. And at this point, I was studying in like the best economics and finance school of Russia. And I was a national team at the moment in sailing. And it happened to be that at this moment, I was in Spain, participating in World Cup. So I'm in Spain studying economics all over, and realizing that my currency just dropped 50% compared to any other world currencies. And none of my professors can actually explain it through all the equations that gave me. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I like, it's all bullshit. So I quit my university the next year and moved to the United States. So at this point, I was adult enough to realize that I don't trust the monetary policy of my country. I don't trust how money works in the world overall. So that was definitely a good experience. But also, like, just being born in a generation after communism, you hear a lot of stories. So my sister was still born in USSR. I was born already in Russian Federation. So like she lived through that as a child. My parents would tell me a lot of stories of how the communism was back in the day. And like, I'm immune to that. Like I'm immune to socialism. I'm immune to trusting the government, trusting their plan and just obeying, because I saw people do that before. It did not work out well for them. So I'm not gonna make the same mistake. And that's what I think actually happened in Australia. That they've been comfortable for so long that they really started trusting their government way too much, started just simply blindly obeying, and guess where they got themselves now? And still 76% of Australia, I believe, fully supporting the current lockdown they have because they think it's for the best. That's for their safety. Well, let's see 10 years from now when they're gonna realize how badly they fucked themselves up.
Yeah. Amen. And so maybe like that's a plug to your business you have now, and it looks like it's doing quite well. So what led you to Plan B passports, and maybe you can explain a bit about how it's differentiated from other immigration services.
Yep. So at first, I'm an immigrant myself. Throughout my immigration process, I really realized that having even multiple driver licenses really helps you in different ways, just because you have choices now. So I started looking at this concept more and more, and it actually has a name, the concept called flag theory. My own definition of the flag theory is limiting your dependency on any one particular state by stacking flags and jurisdictions that might be beneficial for you in various ways. It can be better regulatory environment for your business. It can be better tax regime for you personally or for your business again. It just may be a better lifestyle and education for your kids. So the more I looked into this concept, the more I realized that I'm really into this shit. And I already went through my own immigration, and my lawyer totally quit on me halfway through. So I had to complete the immigration myself, and being a college dropout, I was like, it wasn't really that hard. Maybe I can figure something else out. And then, Plan B came along. I actually met somebody who's already been doing passports, and he was working with completely different audience, mostly Russian-speaking community too. And he needed help with Bitcoin. At this point, I was already a Bitcoiner, and he was like, all these people are trying to pay me in Bitcoin. What's happening? And it's like bull market 2017. So he's really getting a lot of interest from early adopters. And I helped him out to understand Bitcoin, et cetera, et cetera. And then he was like, Katie, you should just start your own company. We have different audiences. I'll be happy to help as well. So I was like, hell yeah, I should start my own company. Because I'm so into that stuff. It doesn't even feel like work, just because I love it so much. And it's been great. We've been growing a lot, especially lately. All the things in the world basically doing free marketing for me. All the governments in the world doing free marketing for Plan B passport without realizing it. First we had the lockdowns. People realized they don't have the freedom they thought they had. Then we had U.S. election where half the country is unhappy with the results. Then Canada went socialist. Then Australia decided that they have jail all around the country now. And then Bitcoin started just skyrocketing. So all these things got together, and Plan B has been growing.
All right. And then, how is Plan B? So let's go into the process. How is Plan B differentiated from other immigration services? How does Bitcoin fit into it all? How does it make a client's life easier?
So we're not a regular legal firm that helps you to move to another country. We basically only focus on countries that provide you with citizenship by investment process, which means that you don't have to move to the island. You don't have to live there. You can just do it all remotely and get a passport 6-8 months later. Now, on top of it, when Plan B passport started, we work with 30 different jurisdictions, but then I just very quickly nailed it down to 7. And first of all, due to my audience interest, because I realized that's what solves their pains, but also through my own philosophical alignment, I really don't think taxes should exist. So the places I work with right now provide you with 0 capital gains tax, 0 global income tax, 0 inheritance tax, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
And probably you guys read Sovereign Individual, and they talk a lot about the fall of nation states, and the way it's gonna happen is because people are now able to move from one country to another quite easily. First of all, we're all remote workers, so we don't have to commit to our job anymore, etc. And the most important piece of all that is that we can just remember 12 words, pick up all our wealth and go. And you can do shit with that. You're not going to stop me at the border and take all the gold from my trunk. You're not going to, not allow me to sell my real estate because it's all here, 12 words. So like moving to where it's better for you now and choosing with your feet, voting with your feet, right? We like to say that. We vote with your money with Bitcoin. We vote with your feet with flat theory. You just go where it's better for you right now. You bring your wealth where you think you're treated best. You basically decide what government provides you with better service at better price. And now you go there. So now they are the ones benefiting from fruits of your labor, from your wealth, etc. And that's beautiful. And Bitcoiners are in the front row of this sovereign individual thesis playing out.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk about the process. Sorry, Ricki, you want to ask something?
Yeah. So Katie, you said you narrowed down to a couple of countries that you're working with. These are mainly in the Caribbean, right? What are the countries you focus on?
Yeah, 5 of them are in the Caribbean. It's St. Kitts, Antigua, Grenada, Dominica, and St. Lucia. And also I work with Vanuatu, an island next to Australia, as well as Portugal. Portugal program is pretty different though. It's not a passport program, it's a residency permit. But still, Portugal has definitely much better tax regime than any other European countries. They have this real estate investment program that leads you to permanent residency, and then 5 years later, you're able to apply for a passport. And if you can pass language exam and some other stuff, you'll be able to obtain Portuguese passport.
Portugal is quite friendly on Bitcoin around taxation, right?
Yeah, they've been doing somewhat well on that.
My only concern with Portugal, though, is that they're part of the EU. And being part of the EU means you got the EU fucking around with their business, like passing laws and trying to, enforce EU level laws on Portugal, as opposed to the rest of the other countries, which are sovereign states themselves.
Yeah. Other countries in the EU used to have citizenship by investment program. Cyprus, for example, Malta, right? And they were forced to close their program. Cyprus had to shut it down because of the pressure from EU. And that's something I always tell to my clients. I'm like, hey, what you're going into, Portugal is still EU, and they do have pressure from other countries. I believe they have somewhat runway until they will have to change things, but it may still happen. And that's what I always tell to my clients overall, that I can't promise that any one particular jurisdiction will do best for you for the rest of your life, right? And again, that's about sovereign individual thesis, where you have to constantly vote with your feet. And it doesn't mean you have to run. It just means that you have to strategize in advance and be ready, be prepared to leave if you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the process? So with Antigua, St. Kitts, you're probably the most popular ones, right? I know you've said in the past it's around 5 to 6 months process from beginning, initiation, right to end. Can you just kind of take people through, what are the high level processes there, and how they would pay for it, what amounts they would be, just for those 2 examples, because we don't want to kind of dilute it with all these different countries.
Mm-hmm. So for single applicants, let's say the most popular program is actually St. Lucia. They provide you with the best price. For a family of 4, let's say it would be Antigua with the full price of 175, let's say, depending on kids' age, etc., etc. But just to give you an example, obviously we'll do precise calculations for any client that comes to Plan B Passport. Basically, the way it works, let's go through single applicant with St. Lucia. The very first step is my internal due diligence. That's where I'm trying to protect myself and make sure that you're not an international search. That takes 24 hours. After that, we're ready to sign the agreement. This is where you pay 50% of my professional service fee, and we kick off the process with a call between you, me, and my legal team.
Sorry, on that point, so they pay a 50% initiation fee in Bitcoin.
My professional fees is $20,000 overall, and you can always pay them in Bitcoin.
And that Bitcoin, sorry, this is a little technical question. So that Bitcoin, when they pay you from their country of residence, is deemed as a taxable event if they're in a normal country, right?
Yep,
Just for technical.
most likely.
Okay. Sorry, carry on.
Well, it can always be a Bitcoin backed loan, and they can pay me in USD.
Oh,
They can pay
okay.
me, yeah.
I was going to ask that. So they can actually get USDT, say from BlockFi or something like that, and pass that USDT to you. So
Yeah.
That's interesting. Cool.
Yeah. So that in that case, it will be non-taxable event. So again, we kick off the process with call between you, me, and my legal team. We customize the checklist of the documents for you, make sure that you know what paperwork needs to be collected on your side while we start filling out government forms on our side, and just walk you through the whole process. For single applicant, it usually takes about 30 days to prepare all the paperwork, because it consists of things like diplomas, police clearance, some medical stuff that you need to provide as well, any military records, etc., etc. So around 30 days in is when we submit the application to the island. With St. Lucia, they don't really have high processing fees. So at this point, you pay around $10,000 for processing fees, passport fee, and due diligence fee on the island. And after that, we just wait. We wait for about 90 to 120 days. That's how long it takes St. Lucia to process your application. And let's say 120 days in, we get a letter of pre-approval. If we don't get any additional requests, we get a letter of pre-approval. And that means that basically the due diligence was clear. You're all good to go. They don't have any more questions. They send you bank credentials. And this is where you send the actual $100,000 donation into some sustainable growth fund, as they call it, or some government fund. As well as paying second half of my fees, and 3 weeks later you get the passport.
Nice. And then the privacy through all of this. How can someone remain private throughout this process? Because I know that these countries, most of them, as you said on your site, don't share information. How can they hide this fact from regulators and all that?
Well, those are government entities, and they just have somewhat okay system in place and making sure that the information doesn't go out. And that's one of their value proposition, to not share your, to keep the process confidential, because people who apply for second passport do care about confidentiality and privacy. On my side, I probably care about privacy as much as you all do. And we use the best practices we can in the moment. Like, we use Signal for most of the communication regarding the paperwork, for example, as well as I don't keep information after you go through the process. I don't keep records on my clients. I try to erase it all because I don't want to be target at all. And I just don't have this information. You can ask me as many times as you can, but not gonna help neither me nor you. So we just doing our best and implement the best practices.
So, Katie, from a COVID perspective in these countries now, right? Like, so say St. Lucia, how are these countries handling COVID and the lockdown and all the draconian measures that are being imposed around the world? Like, are these countries more freedom orientated because they're trying to attract foreign investors in this way, or are they kind of going the same way as everywhere else is?
I would say basically nobody in the world took care of COVID in a sane way. So I would say all government went nuts, and that's what they do. Not that they went nuts recently. So basically, what I would say is it's about the pushback, right? And now imagine Caribbean countries with the whole Bob Marley culture are obeying masks and vaccine mandates, and I'm like, I just can't see that happening. So they do have some mandates in place, not the vaccination for sure, but mostly life on the island didn't change for the most part. Like, St. Kitts was a little flaky at first, and I think it's just some local politics was happening. But for example, St. Lucia, the travel is overbooked right now. There's no restriction. You need a PCR test to fly in, but that's about it. Some of them did say publicly that there's not going to be vaccine mandate because they do think it's not constitutional, but in a way. And I think they handle it somewhat okay compared to many countries in the world. And you can travel there. You don't have to wear masks. Like my clients send me pictures from a local bar where they're just hanging out with some locals and some expats. Everything is fine.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time in the Caribbean. I'm a sailor as well, and I sailed a boat across the Atlantic from Cape Town to the Caribbean. And the first piece of land I saw in 37 days was that cliff as you come into St. Lucia, that like massive rock. Like it's an amazing place. So
awesome.
I could see, it's great. But I can see myself living out my days in St. Lucia. That's for sure. It's like one of the best places on earth, Not all Caribbean. Not all Caribbean islands are equal. St. Thomas is a bit of a shithole, whereas St. Martin's a bit cuck as well. But St. Lucia's great. The BVIs are great. Antigua is really nice. It's beautiful though.
What's your favorite out of all then, Katie?
I would probably sail around as well because it's just so close to each other. It's 10-minute flight from St. Kitts to Antigua, for example, and pretty much the same to St. Lucia. So I would probably spend a lot of time in Antigua just because they have a lot of sailboat races. And as a former professional sailor, that's my thing. I still want to do that. Probably it would be Antigua.
Yeah, Antigua Race Week is a party. It's a good time.
Oh yeah.
Do you advise your clients to do the property investments rather than the government donation?
I try not to advise on that because that's more of a your personal choice. But I try to give as much information as I possibly can so they could make an educated decision.
Yeah.
Now, probably compare, let's say we compare Plan B Passport to any other industry player. For me, it's much more donation only. Like 99% of my clients go with donation because of the opportunity cost, right? If you're a traditional investor or businessman, you come in and you're like, I can just donate 150 grand or I can purchase a 250 grand property. For them, it's much more reasonable to buy property. But when you start thinking about it and you're like, wait, either it's 130 grand for St. Lucia altogether, or it's 250 grand into real estate plus like around $50,000 legal fees on top of that for the due diligence, etc. The opportunity cost of not putting the difference between those two prices, those two costs into Bitcoin is huge. And you're freezing like 250 grand in real estate for 5 years instead of buying Bitcoin. The opportunity cost usually is decisive factor.
And just on that point, like with the sovereign individual thesis, and we see it playing out in South Africa, like real estate actually becomes a bit of an anchor. It weighs you down, and it's a choke point that can be applied to you. So if you go into the Caribbean, get yourself a boat, live on your boat, sail around between islands, and you've got so much more freedom than if you're tied down to a single property that you have to now pay to maintain. And you don't know if it's going to go up in value.
Censorship-resistant travel. Yeah. Nobody can stop you.
No one can stop you. Even Greta's happy with you. Life is good,
That's right.
Although she's never happy, so you never know.
Yeah. And I still consider real estate a good thing once in a while if it brings you more freedom. So let's say like I still want to raise a family, etc., etc. So now let's consider how do I make it happen when I still buy real estate but limit my dependency on the state and make myself more self-reliant than I was. So I envision this off-grid house that runs fully on like rainwater or local well, and then you have solar energy, you grow your own food, you have chickens and all that stuff. So it's still an anchor because you can't pick it up and go, but at least you're off-grid, you're self-reliant, and if shit hits the fan in a different way, not in a way that like your government goes nuts and the rest of the world is fine, so fleeing may not be necessarily the best thing. You can basically anchor down and hide in your own property, take care of yourself and your family, grow food, educate your kids, and still be okay. Print guns, protect yourself,
Oh yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean you're in the right place in the world for that now, right? Like being in Texas, you've got like the most secure property rights. You're surrounded by people with guns who are the most rabid pro-freedom people on earth. it's a good place to be. South Africa, I think, is quite similar to Russia in what we've gone through with like currency devaluations and unsecure property rights and huge amounts of corruption. And I mean, this is why you see so many expats from both Russia and South Africa going all over the world to find, more secure places to be. And in myself and Brandon, our position, like all of our contemporaries and peers are buying property, and we look at that and we're like, you guys are crazy. Like expropriation without compensation is on the cards. And basically, that means the government will take your property without paying you. That's insane. Like, why would you buy real estate in that environment? But it's a different story when you're in Texas, because no one's coming to take your land there, and if they do, they're going to have a tough time of doing it.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. But what I think about countries like yours and mine, I believe we're going to thrive very soon. So we had this the Western world was on top of the world for a while, and now when they all good times create weak men create bad times. Now when all of them are going into the bad times zone, and we're just coming out of like bad times with a bunch of strong men realizing how world actually works, we're gonna thrive. And I believe that countries like Venezuela and Lebanon are gonna really thrive 20 years from now, because they have the most need for Bitcoin. They realize why it's valuable. They realize why they shouldn't trust government. So they're going to start building this self-reliant life, and they will get out really well off from that.
Yeah, said. They're the first movers, right? They're the first movers. And the first movers will always win in Bitcoin.
We had I don't know, the rest of the world might not know about this, but we had a pretty hectic scenario in July in South Africa where there was these mass riots in Durban, which is like a city on the East Coast, where people were just looting for like a week. They were just looting every single shop they could find in their thousands. They were just like, going through neighborhoods and communities and destroying and burning and carrying on. And the local communities pulled together, those who had, luckily we still have firearms in South Africa. So the local communities pulled together and defended their own communities and suburbs, because the ravaging hordes would have, burnt their houses down. And this was happening about a month after the government made its intentions clear that they wanted to disarm individuals, disallow them from having firearms for self-defense. And people got red pilled faster than anything, because no one is giving up their gun in South Africa for the next 20 years after that happened. They were like, not a fucking chance. We've seen this. It's not happening. And we're also very lucky here is that no one trusts the government, because we've seen how useless and how criminal they are. So places like Australia, they trust the government, and they're in for a bad time. Whereas here, at least we defended in that regard.
Yeah, you got
and we have lots of guns.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
we don't want to be too negative about South Africa. It's a great place. It's beautiful. The food's good. The weather's amazing. And the government's incompetent. So got a lot of freedom in that regard.
And that's a good plug to go back to like people who want to leave if they want to. So I'm sure a lot of people ask about businesses and entities and those kind of things. So obviously, if you're a digital nomad, you can work wherever you want. So you just earn in that manner. And it doesn't really matter, and you work in a tax efficient manner. But have you helped people move businesses or their income generation assets over as well?
I wouldn't say that's the primary thing that I do at Plan B Passport, just because I don't believe that I'm an expert in that just yet. We will definitely expand there. So as of now, we mostly just help our clients who obtain passports to start entities in those different countries where they got the passport from. Because I believe to complete the flag, you basically need to get like driver license, bank account, set up a company there, perhaps a trust, something like that. But I did find a couple of really great CPAs, lawyers who will help you kind of structure and strategize on your corporate tax as well as your business structure. So sometimes I work with them and we'll strategize it together. I help executing that, but I don't advise people on that. Just not comfortable with that just yet.
Okay, because South Africa is just as bad as the US, and you're taxed worldwide on your income. So just trying to think about, it's terrible, and I'm just trying to think about the best way for South Africans in general to how what processes they'll need to go through to go, let's just say they land in St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Antigua, like how long until they are within that jurisdiction of tax? How long does that take?
Well, to establish your tax residency in this jurisdiction doesn't take long. You basically come in, you made sure that now you are part of you're a tax resident of this place, you have a permanent place, you get a bank account, you start doing your stuff out of this country. But then the biggest issue with all that is how to become a non-tax resident of your previous country, right? So let's say Australia, they have like a full process of, it's pretty straightforward compared to other countries, but still it's a full process of like shutting off some of your bank accounts, either selling your property or renting it out and things like that, right? So it's like this is something that I always tell people, but I always advise them to go reach out to your local CPA. Any CPA will know answer to this question. How do you become a non-tax resident of your jurisdiction? Because that's just like you can obtain passport, but you still need to take care of the second piece too, and you may want to do it simultaneously.
Yeah. Also in South Africa right now, it's only after 3 years after financially immigrating, you can take your retirement annuity / pension fund out. Can you point people in the right direction as well if they were to utilize your services, and how to move that if they were to become a second citizen in these countries?
We would need to strategize it together. Sometimes I would be happy to jump on a call with your local CPA, and it would depend a lot on like what kind of properties you have. Are those corporate entities? Is it brokerage accounts, etc., etc.? So depending on what assets you have in your country, we would figure out what's the best way and what's the best timeline to move it all into another jurisdiction, and how to not pay as much taxes as you might have had to pay if you didn't think about it in advance.
Yeah. And what do you think are the biggest pain points people go through in these processes?
I would say definitely one of the biggest pain points is figuring out how to get out of your country, basically. So like obtaining passports, I'm taking care of you all. It's a smooth process, smooth sailing, no problem there. Now, the first thing is to actually make the decision on that and be like, okay, I'm willing to spend 150 grand on that, as well as I'm willing to actually put effort and time into becoming a non-tax resident of my jurisdiction. I'm willing to move my family out of my country elsewhere and basically redo my life. So that's a huge thing. And that's what I always say. It sucks big time that we are not born in a free world, and then because of our mistakes, we end up being not free. It's all the way around. You're being born into not being free, and you have to take steps out of it, right? Put effort, put finances into that, your time into that, and actually set yourself free. And like, this is a journey that we all have chosen. Like, we might have found it with Bitcoin, but then it kind of spread it out throughout all other parts of our life too. But we're willing to take those steps, and we're willing to keep fighting. And the journey itself is pretty rewarding too, I would say. That's like a necessary part of our lives at this point.
Yeah. And Katie, the biggest thing I think is people trying to find a sense of community. Like a lot of people who leave their home country struggle when they land in Australia or New Zealand. In South Africans, that's normally where South Africans go. Is they struggle to find a sense of community, and the more expats there are there, the easier it is. And have you found that there's quite a large expat community in St. Lucia and in Antigua and St. Kitts and those places?
Huge. Last time I visited was at the very beginning of COVID, and I'm considering the next trip in the very near future. There was huge expat community from all over the Europe, Australia, Canada, US, UK, all over. And the community is growing. And like what I noticed in Antigua, it's one of the most physically active places in the world, because those people are either retired or digital nomads. They can afford living an active life. You know, they can do triathlons, they can train for that stuff. They sail a lot, they play cricket, all those pretty cool things that are happening on the island. And they're building communities. They're becoming closer, even so they're all from different countries.
Have you figured out how cricket works yet?
No, definitely not.
It's a very confusing game. Yeah, luckily us colonists, we all play cricket, so we'll get it. But when I was in America, I lived in America for a while, and just speaking to them about cricket, they're like, what the hell is this game? This makes no sense.
Yeah, I definitely have no idea how that works. But
also the least...
Antigua has huge cricket stadium.
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah, it's massive. It's the least active sport on earth as well. You stand around in the sun all day and do nothing. for 5 days in a row.
Yep. Sounds like my sport, being Siberian and getting sunburned in a matter of 5 minutes. Yep, that's gonna work.
Katie,
Brandon, sorry, you. No, I was gonna switch gears a bit. I mean, we've talked about the passport story. I'm quite interested in your history.
I want to ask one more question. Like, Katie, around the countries and the whole jurisdictional game theory, do you see other island nations doing this as well? Do you see any others in the pipeline coming up?
I think we will see a big run in the countries, like in the new countries, doing that stuff. Like we've seen El Salvador coming out with Bitcoin as a legal tender, and they do have this investment program to get the residency. So I believe when people start realizing how easy it is to flee with all your wealth, and how, like, especially after COVID, when everybody went remote, they now, like, all the people realize that they can move elsewhere, and other governments should jump on this train and be somewhat a good opportunity, like take it as an opportunity and provide people with a better way to move countries, to become tax resident of their new jurisdiction, to be more beneficial for them in terms of taxes, lifestyle, etc., etc. So I believe it will become a big trend. Maybe not this decade, but next one.
Yeah, definitely. And a very popular jurisdiction for South Africans is Mauritius nowadays. I know you don't work with Mauritius, but are you familiar at all with what they're doing over there?
No, not familiar at all.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a similar concept, I suppose, to the Caribbean. Very low tax rates. I think tax rates flat tax of 15%, no capital gains, no state taxes, none of that bullshit. And South Africans are just fleeing there in their droves. Anyone with money is going there because, why not? Yeah, it's a 5-hour flight from Johannesburg. Why not? But yeah, I expect to see this trend accelerating, especially with small countries that are, don't have large natural resource bases. Are there any others you think are on the up and coming that you see besides El Salvador popping up as good places?
I definitely want to see more Latin American countries doing that. And you've seen a huge Reddit blow up about Brazil doing the same that El Salvador did. So what happened in El Salvador is the government gave $30 worth of Bitcoin to every citizen into their Lightning wallet. So the huge Brazilian Reddit community decided to buy $30 of Bitcoin each in a solidarity to El Salvador. And I thought it was amazing. Again, that's a community, that's a support, which is pretty beautiful, but also it's a good thing that we have those trends. And I tried to share it with as many Russian friends as I possibly could. We all started spreading it around the world. And that's what we need. We need people to start buying $30 worth of Bitcoin and realizing that's the way to freedom. So I think that's pretty cool. I also believe that East European countries will jump on this train very soon because they're so cut off of all the benefits that EU has within each other and all the trades they do with Five Eyes countries such as Canada, UK, US, Australia, and New Zealand. So one of the reasons that Russian currency dropped down so much is because of sanctions. So after Crimea crisis, they put a lot of trade sanctions on us. So we basically can't export much, or we can't produce for other countries anymore. And that was a huge, terrible thing that happened to us. So when we realized that we cut out of the whole global trade, maybe we should jump on a whole global currency trade and not be as reliant on petrodollar, etc. anymore.
Yeah. Do you see any risks to these countries currently providing these programs? Is there a lot of pressure from the I don't know, WEF or IMF or any of these people?
There must be something happening, but in most scenarios, it's just governments are being inefficient in a way that like they're not creative. They're not businesses that trying to be better, right? Like in a business setting, in a capitalism world, they would be like, okay, what is the best way for us to optimize for this and that, and get more incoming interest, and like better ROI and all that stuff. But that's not how governments think. They have monopoly on violence. They have monopoly on printing money. So like they don't really care about being efficient and being good. And again, that's what's gonna hurt them the most is
Yeah.
because they will have to compete between each other for our wealth and fruit of our labors because they're no longer a monopoly when you're going in a global world, right? They're all the same governments that will have to compete. And that's why I believe more countries will jump on that.
You know, the one thing they've lost is they've totally lost the ability to control capital and the movement of capital globally because of Bitcoin, right? So I believe that's why they're trying their best to control the movement of people now. Because if you can't control money, at least try to control people where they can move. And this is why it's so important, I think, for people to get a second passport as quickly as possible. So, I mean, I heard you mention this on Peter McCormack's show, but if you're a citizen of another country, they cannot deny you the right to leave.
Basically.
So, I mean, I mean, maybe you want to go into this a bit more.
Yeah, so let's say I'm in Australia, an Australian citizen who also obtained Antigua passport. Now, well, there are a few exemptions that they do have officially on the website. It can be like essential travel for government work, it can be sickness, somebody's death, or it can be that you're a citizen of other country and you're returning to your other home country. So maybe you've never been to Antigua, but you just over the last 6 months obtained Antigua passport, and now you're able to leave because you're basically saying to Australia that, hey, I'm going home. You can't stop me. And if you try to stop me, I'm going to reach out to Antigua Embassy and say that I'm your citizen, and I'm being held in Australia. So I would start playing this, kind of enemy game and put them to fight between each other instead of you fighting your government. But it's pretty scary to be locked down in your own country. Like, that's not okay.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And if you've only got one passport, then you've got no options. Like, you're not too far away from being in an open air prison. We have examples in the world today where this is the case. Like, Australia is one, but, we talk about this globally. But North Korea has been going for 70 years, and that's exactly what North Korea is, Yeah. And we laugh about it, but it exists and it's happened before. Like, it's right there for people to see. It's terrifying. Okay, I think let's switch gears away from North Korea. So no one's getting a North Korean passport, I'll tell you that much. Katie, on the topic of Bitcoin. So your history in Bitcoin, you've been in it for quite a while, and you had a run-in with Craig Wright. Do you mind telling us about your experience?
Yeah, that was probably my first big coming out on Twitter. Before that, I was just quietly shit posting to a couple hundred of people. But then, so I was digital nomad for the last 4 years, and I was traveling within the United States or Mexico or Caribbeans. And but I spent a lot of time in Miami. That was my first city of immigration. So I'm in Mexico, and I'm reading this news that Craig Wright hearing is going to be held in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's just like an hour and a half away from where I usually stay in Miami. So I decided to fly to Miami, go to this West Palm Beach hearing, and just, see what's happening. I just wanted to be part of it. I didn't know if I would be able to get in. I didn't know what I would be able to see or hear, but apparently it wasn't that hard to get in. Well, it wasn't that hard to get in, even if you accidentally brought your phone inside the courthouse and the courtroom. So what happened is...
Accidentally.
Didn't know that was not allowed, So I was live tweeting the whole thing from the courtroom, which was apparently not allowed. And it's been happening between like 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. And by the time 4 p.m. happened, my tweet went viral so badly that the plaintiff's lawyer saw them online while in the courtroom because they're allowed to have their computers. So he's like looking at his computer, he's looking at me, he's going to the judge, and this is where I realized that I'm fucked, basically. So he talked to judge while looking at me, and I'm like, putting my shit together, exiting the courtroom because I'm realizing what's happening, not going to the elevators, going down the stairs, like back stairs, and trying to find another exit, realizing there's no other exit, starting running out through the main door, and 4 court guards just running behind me, grabbing me, throwing me on the bench, telling me that I'm in big trouble. So, live tweets were pretty fun, and I went back to the courtroom, and judge actually asked me to come on stage and kind of like talk to me. So I actually made it to the transcript where I'm explaining the situation and my behavior. But the judge.
I'm just trying to tell Twitter what a piece of shit fucking Craig Wright is.
Exactly. I mean, people need to know. And you know what was hilarious? I was the only Maxi there. All other people came in to support bullshit SV. And like, I'm glad that I was there to be against all that bullshit. So I was like, I'm sorry, judge, all that stuff. And he's like, Katie, well, it's partially on us because you went through, this frame was like, what is this?
Metal detector.
Metal detector. Yeah, you went through metal detector. You went through 6 court guards until you got here. And somehow you still had your phone all the way from the morning until 4 p.m. And I'm like, okay, there's a Russian, we learn some stuff in our home country. So that was pretty fun.
Did Craig block you after that?
Oh yeah, he at first he didn't know who I was, so he said hi to everybody in the audience, and I was like, you piece of shit. But then next time when I came to the court hearing 3 weeks later, I decided that I'm gonna look completely different. Like at first I was just a Katie the Russian girl. Next time I decided to get a really ponytail, a lot of makeup so people wouldn't recognize me, look very professional with like high heels and a costume, nice suit. And I walk in and the courthouse guard was like, "Oh, Katie, you're back." I'm like, and then I walk into courtroom and judge is like, "Oh, Katie, where's your phone?" And I'm like, okay, didn't work out. But basically, it was totally legal for me to take a lot of notes in the courtroom, and every 30 minutes run out of the courtroom, grab my phone, tweet about it, run back, again take notes. And that's what I was doing the second time because I realized people are interested in that stuff. That was good.
Oh, I was watching it the whole time. Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? It happened 3 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
3 years ago, yeah.
Time flies.
And he's still at large, fucking with people. Like he sued Cobra the other day in the UK, for hosting the Bitcoin white paper.
Oof.
He's a fucking piece of shit. He's still at it. I don't know when we're gonna be rid of him, but he still hasn't produced his keys, so he still doesn't control the million coins.
And you know what was interesting to see is that it was about basically the coins, the early Satoshi coins and the early mined coins, this whole court hearing. And what was cool to see is that judge over the time. So I went to 4 court hearings over this summer. I had to go back and back because I couldn't miss out anymore. I was hooked, basically. And during the time, Judge really got educated on Bitcoin. He figured out how it all works. He figured out how Shamir's secret scheme works, because that's what Craig Wright was referring to all the time.
Yeah.
And at some point, Judge is like, well, you mentioned this about Shamir's secret sharing, but that's not how it works. This is not true. And I'm like, fuck yeah, this is right. When Judge start catching you on bullshit and you're such a great developer, and Judge really calling you out on that, that's pretty cool.
Do you reckon that Judge is orange pilled? You reckon he's a Bitcoiner now?
I think he must be. He must be by now. And when it happened, Bitcoin was at like what 6,000, probably 10,000. I don't remember, 12 maybe on the way down still. But right now we're at 50 grand. Like this judge better be stacking his government paycheck.
Well, he's definitely not stacking SV. Tell you that much.
That's true. That's true.
So I was actually in our office the other day, and we had a consultant come and speak to us, and he runs a remittance business on top of Bitcoin SV. And I was sitting at the boardroom table across from him when Bitcoin SV got the 51% attack done, and I just saw the color like go from this guy's face. And he was like, oh, fuck. He's like looking at his phone and seeing it happen, and I was like, oh no, bro, you shouldn't have built on SV. Should have built on Lightning, dude.
He wasn't patient enough because he was on Bitcoin, and he just wasn't patient enough to wait for Lightning. And
yeah,
jeez.
There you go. Yeah. That's what happens. But Katie, this has been absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure people will have more questions. We're going to just point them towards you. Would you like let us know some of viewers some more information about how they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Twitter DMs work for random stuff. It doesn't really work for Plan B inquiries, just because I can't drop PDFs there, and I'm not that professional on Twitter as I am on my email. So feel free to either sign up for a free call through website planbpassport.com. You can also just fill out the application. We'll get back to you pretty shortly with precise calculations, etc. As well as Katie at planbpassport.com always works out too. But yeah, Twitter for all random stuff. Happy to chat with plans as well.
Nice, thank you. And awesome. Just from outside, people can buy Bitcoin from us, and you get it straight to your own self-custody, the way it's supposed to be. Please don't keep it on exchanges, for the love of God. And then you can pay Katie all the money you want, and you can go wherever you want, and life's simple. So there's the connection, everyone.
That's pretty cool. One more. Yeah, I went through your website, guys, and I was like, hell yeah, that's good. I got educated on Bitvice.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we're the only self-custody exchange in South Africa, so we're pretty stoked about that. And then just to shill our services a bit more for our viewers, if you guys want to get the audio version of this, you can find the podcast on Spotify or on Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. Go there, subscribe, get it every week straight into your podcast player. And then also, we're working super hard. We keep saying this every week, but the Sat Stacker product is coming, guys. You're going to be able to automatic stack straight to your hardware wallets or your multi-sig. If you want to do a consultation to set up your multi-sig for yourself, for your business, or your trust, let us know. We'll do consultations for you. And that's it from my side. Brandon, anything from you?
All good. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Guys. Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.
Really appreciate it. Have a good one.
Good to have you. Cheers.